Okay, then let's start. I'm sure there's someone might be coming later, but I think it's 7:01 and I think we should start. So I would like to welcome everybody who is on this webinar. We had a lot of people being interested from all over the world. I think some of the people who live overseas were not able to join because of the time difference, but I had a large interest of parents and also educators. So maybe some of them are going to join a little later. So I would like to introduce myself. My name is Pia Seltman. I'm an occupational Germanist, originally educated in Germany. I've been living in the US for like 14 years. My specialty is sensory integration autism. And I'm the founder and the director of TAR Education in Motion. TAR stands for Therapeutic Autism Resources, and we provide parent education, parent coaching, but also webinars to parents, caregivers, and professionals who work with children on the spectrum. So this webinar, the idea for the webinar came up because I have noticed that a lot of parents, but also newly educated occupational therapists still have an interest in learning more about sensory integration, but also would like to get more strategies on what to do with their child to be better regulated. So I thought I'll create a webinar that helps parents with learning strategies, but also understanding the sensory integration system a little bit better. So this webinar is going over sensory systems, but also strategies and what stimming and sensory seeking behavior is, meltdowns versus tantrums, because there is a difference, and then also transitioning, how you can help your child transition from one activity to the next. And at the end, we'll go over some questions. Hello for people who are just joining. We just started, so we haven't really missed anything. I would like to let you know that this is a recorded webinar, so just for your information. So what is sensory integration? Sensory integration is everything that you process in your environment. If it's something that you hear, something that you feel, some kind of movements you do, so everything that happens in the environment at school, at work, outside. So when we look over the sensory integration system, there's a couple, and some of them are more important than others. My opinion as an occupational therapist, I think that the proprioceptive system is one of the most important ones. If you're not quite familiar with this term, it's more body awareness, so everything what your body does. Another very powerful system is the tactile system, which everything is that your body or your skin experiences. Then have the visual system where everything what you see is processed. It's not the 20/20 vision. It's more what your brain does, what you see, and then your brain processes. Then you have the vestibular system, which everything is balanced and so forth. Then you have the olfactory system, what it smells. The interoceptive system, which is kind of linked with the proprioceptive body awareness. It's basically everything that you feel from the inside. Auditory system, when it comes to hearing. Gustatory system, when it's the taste, and tactile system, which we just mentioned. Okay, so when we look at the proprioceptive system, again, it's everything your body does. It's what the joints, the muscles, and the ligaments basically experience through movements. So, and I put this kind of together to kind of get a better understanding what children experience when they have problems in their system, which I'm going to go over first, and then we're going to talk about strategies. So most children that have problems in the proprioceptive system have a lack of strength. So you can basically see this when their endurance for walking is usually lower. When they participate in any activities outdoors, they seem a little bit more on the weak side. They're not, they can be strong in terms of pushing and pulling, but the resistance or the endurance is usually weaker, or their body, their core can be weak. Most kids that have problems in that area are very hyperactive. So they're constantly running around trying to get some body awareness input. They have a lack of attention because of that. And they also have a problem with sitting still. So the reason for that is most kids that constantly want this input, body awareness input, they're constantly running around seeking that input, and that's why there's a lack of attention, because they have a harder time sitting still and pay attention, because their brain is like constantly looking. They also have an increased pain tolerance. So I was working with a family recently, and a 4-year-old girl fell off the monkey bars and broke her arm. It took them about a week to find out that her arm was broken, because she didn't really experience any pain. The only reason why they got suspicious was because she didn't use her arm as much as she used before, and they went to the ER and did an X-ray. So the pain tolerance can be extremely low when you have issues in this sensory system. So it's also difficult with grading strength and body positions. What that means is, like, for example, when you hug someone, you can hug someone more loosely, or you can give too hard squeezes, so it's hard for you to understand how much can you hug. Or also when you toss something or close the door, sometimes grading how much force you use for your body is sometimes difficult. Also when you play Simon Says, so, and parent says, okay, copy me and do this position, and children have a harder time copying this. They just have not really understood how they can put their body in position in order to copy a movement. Then kids with that seek that input mostly also enjoy really crashing on objects, falling on the floor. Like sometimes you notice that when they walk by a furniture piece, that they fall into it or have a hard time understanding how far that piece of furniture is away. So everything that's in space, kind of figure out how far you're away, and also crushing the floor, crashing in people. So those kids also can have hypomobile joints. What that means is when you stand on all four and you have your elbows basically more in extension, because the body is still kind of figuring out where it's in space. That can mean that the stability of the joints is just less. And when some kids also have like lack of strength, that's kind of combined. So, and I also noticed that a lot of kids enjoy deep pressure, like pulling and pushing activity, to kind of help them calm down. So then I would like to give you some strategies for the system if you want to work on this with your child, to also help them regulate. So the first thing, which I think is a great strategy to work with your child, is the joint compression massage. I have a little video here that I did a while back with one of my students, and which I'm gonna play, and I hope it's gonna work. I tested it earlier and it worked, so let's see. So let's do some joint compression. So what you want to do is you want to stabilize the joint. So if anybody cannot hear it, please let me know. The shoulder joint here, one hand goes on top of the shoulder girdle, the other hand goes below the joint. So to target this, you kind of push the joint, the shoulder joint, into shoulder girdle. You see I'm going up and down, and then you just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you move on to the next joint, which is the elbow. You hold the elbow at the top and the bottom, kind of go into extension, and you do the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can do the next thing with the wrist, where you also hold at the top and the bottom, and kind of hold the hand in the palm to kind of get a better grip. And then the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when we look at the hand, so each finger has 3 joints. In the thumb, there's 1 joint here, 1 joint here, and 1 joint here. For the long fingers, 1, 2, 3. So when we start at the bottom here, you want to hold at the wrist, and then to stabilize this joint, hold the wrist and then the thumb above the joint, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For the next joint, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the top again, you've stabilized on each part, each end of the joint. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for the other finger, same. You hold top and the bottom, and go 1, 2, 3, 4,
5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the last one again, hold at the top and the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I would also suggest, Malone, if you want to lie down for a second, if you have a child that has a hard time with putting shoes on and you want to get the attention towards the foot, you can even do joint compression at the foot. So you hold above the ankle, below the ankle, and you just push 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to kind of get the attention to the foot so the child gets more aware of where the shoe actually has to go. So let's
Oops. Okay. So all these strategies are there for helping your child to regulate when they are about to tip into a meltdown or when you feel like they're getting a little bit more upset. So I have used the joint compression on a lot of kids when I noticed they're having a hard time following instructions or when they're about to get upset, when I want to help them with transitioning skills. So anywhere where you feel like your child needs to be a little bit more grounded and needs a little bit more help to stay regulated. What I just mentioned in the video with the shoes, it's like I have a couple of kids when it's ready to, or when it's time to put on shoes, that they have a hard time paying attention where their foot has to go in. So when I do the joint compression a couple of times, the awareness is more towards the foot and they're like, oh, hang on a second, there's my foot. So, and then it helps them better to actually put their foot into a shoe just because the attention is more geared towards their shoe since they can feel their ankle a little better. So the next activity, which I really like, is bear hugs. So bear hugs, what that means basically mean you give yourself a big hug. Most of the kids can't do that themselves, but you as a parent can give a bear hug. If your child has a hard time tolerating that, I would give it a try to be consistent and continue giving bear hugs, because sometimes I have noticed when children are getting upset, their brain has a hard time recognizing what's actually going on. And continuous bear hugs can help. It's more that the parent is consistently there, provides support. And most kids fall in place when you be consistent with body awareness activities. So another activity is the wheelbarrow walk. And the next slide has a couple pictures that can show what all of this means. Then picture schedules is also something. I have another slide later on where I can go more in depth over it. But picture schedule is basically something where you get a picture for each activity that you do throughout the day to provide activities that the child is supposed to do to stay more regulated. So then also for this body awareness system, a really good idea is a weighted vest, a blanket, or a compression vest. Basically what that does is when the child is like the bear hug more tight around their body, that provides more body awareness and space, which helps also the child to be more grounded. It's basically when you came home after a massage, you feel your body way more because all this massaging your body can... Hi, Keisha. Hi, Keisha. Welcome. Helps to be more regulated and be more grounded. So that's the same for weighted blankets. It can be very beneficial to use a weighted blanket at night to help your child settle down in bed when they have a harder time just laying down, because the weight kind of pushes them into the mattress and provides more body awareness. So a weighted vest should be about 5% of the child's body weight, while a weighted blanket can be up to 10% of the child's body weight. So another fun activity is a sandwich game. Basically, a child lays down on the floor and you have something more heavy like a therapy ball, and you roll over the body of the child, give a little bit more pressure. If your kid is verbal, they can even tell you where and how much they have to, or you have to push. If they are not verbal, then I would just kind of watch the face, how they react. But I have experienced that many of my kids that I have worked with over the years really enjoyed the sandwich game. Then there's also body socks. The next slide is going to have a picture where you can see better. So additional strategies which I have found really helpful over the years is when you take your child grocery shopping and you want them to be more regulated or feel like a lot of noise is going on in the store, they're kind of tipping. So have them participate in either pushing a grocery store or also at home carrying a hamper. It's like the idea of carrying a little bit heavier things, not too heavy for the child, but basically because everything is heavy, that makes the body, the muscles, joints, and ligament work. And that heavy work helps the child to be more regulated. You can even put a heavy book in the backpack or in the book bag for school if if a kid has a hard time wearing their book bag to school because they don't like the tactile input. Put a heavy book in so they feel their backpack not as like tickling or not as bothering, but it's actually more grounded. So the idea for the proprioceptive system is really regulating and activating joints, muscles, and ligaments to kind of help the body, so to kind of help the child to feel their body better. So you can also use fidgets to squeeze. There are many, many fidgets on the market. And I have experienced in the past that it's really a try and error to figure out which fidget is the right one for you. There's some that spin, some that squeeze, some that have lights, some you pull and push. So it's kind of a try and error to figure out what is actually benefiting your kid. Also chewy toys when your child chews on a lot of things, like a shirt, and fingers. A chewy toy is always a good activity or a good tool to use to see if that helps your child to get better regulated without actually chewing on something that is not as appropriate. So then there are also cover over the bed and calming corners and tents. So, and here is the slide with all those pictures. So that's the body sock. When you look at this, so kids can basically also go in there and get like it's a more tight space, which can be really calming for kids. There are different sizes. So you kind of have to find the right size that works for your child. So this down here is the wheelbarrow walk. And if a child has more hypermobile joints, you can see this here. This child has relatively stable joints, so she does not go in hyperextension, but you see that her back is really arched. It's usually a sign that the posture and core strength is not as developed yet. For example, here, if you want to work on your child with this strategy, I would recommend holding the feet not too high so that she actually has a chance to develop enough strength in her arms without collapsing. This strategy can be used when you, for example, want to help your child regulate from the dinner table to somewhere, like getting something, or if you want to help them transition better to the dinner table. Maybe you wheelbarrow walk to the bathroom first to wash hands, or you wheelbarrow walk somewhere to kind of provide some proprioceptive input to help your child better get regulated when it's difficult or when they had to sit for a long time. Wheelbarrow walk from A to B. I would keep it structured so there's always a final destination, so not just wheelbarrow walk throughout the house like without any destination, because when there is a structure, that also helps children to be more regulated versus like being all over. So this is this picture here is a nice example for a calming tent. I love those activities. When kids most of the time love them too. It's like basically a little quiet place somewhere in the house, and you can put anything you want in there, from like sensory light over favorite sensory toys, books, pillows, blankets. And what I have noticed over the past years is the smaller the tent, actually the better, because if it's a bigger tent, it's more like kids feel more lost in this. It's just like when you go to the cafeteria in a university, they're huge, and when you like upset or when you kind of go there for the first time, the size of the cafeteria can be overwhelming, versus when you go to a smaller cafe, it's more comfortable and it's just more warming. So, and this one is an example of cover over the bed. It's also when you want to help your child get regulated at night. Everything that is a closer space provides more security and more stability. And the bigger it is, the less structured it is. So that's something to help your child kind of wind down better. Okay. So now let's look at the tactile system. Earlier I had said the tactile system is everything that is organizing information through the skin. So you kind of have to distinguish that between hyper and hypo. What that means is hyper is basically are the kids that are super sensitive to any kind of tactile input, and hypo are the kids that are super seeking. They're constantly doing something. So when you look at the hyper tactile kids, those are mostly the kids that don't like wearing certain clothes. They are always bothered by the tags in the clothes. They avoid certain food textures because it's not just that your skin gets irritated, it's also what's in your mouth. There are also taste buds. It's just not just what's going on with fingers or on your body. So most of the time when kids have a problem with the tactile system, they also have a problem in the oral system with food. So those kids usually get super upset when their hands are dirty, want to wash their hands immediately, or request their parents that they clean their hands. Those kids usually have a hard time taking a shower, a bath. They avoid washing hair or combing hair, and also avoid using lotion and shampoo. On the contrary, the hypo kids are the kids that really seek any kind of tactile input. So they're usually the messy eaters. They have a hard time even feeling what's going on their fingers. They don't feel what's on their fingers if there's something in their face. They enjoy touching everything. So when you go to the grocery store or anywhere, they always want to touch stuff. So they enjoy playing with different materials. They have decreased sensibility on fingers and body, which can also have an impact on temperature feeling. So when you can't feel what's going on with your fingers or with your skin in general, those kids are usually the ones when you put the water in the bathtub and you feel like it's right for you, and then your kid gets in there and like, oh my God, it's too hot. So most of the time, kids with issues with the tactile system, they prefer a little bit colder water, not freezing cold, but the tendency is that it's a little colder than what people with average tactile input feel as warm. So when your child has problems with the tactile system and doesn't have the right temperature feeling, it can be a little risky, because if you put your fingers on the stove and you don't feel it, you're not going to pull it back. So it's also a safety reaction. And if you don't feel everything, you can burn yourself very easily. So let's look at what can we do here. So if you want to help your child with the tactile system, you kind of want to see if your kid is more hyper or hypo. So exposure to different materials is a good idea when your child is active, because they want to feel as much input as possible, because you have to kind of look at it. When the norm is here and your kid is up here, you want to provide tactile input, so your kid comes kind of down. So you want to balance it out. Just like when your kid is more hyper, it's up here, it's always anxious, doesn't want to touch a lot of things, but you want to get it a little bit higher up. You want to provide some input so you kind of balance, they come up, so you can kind of balance them out. So the difference between exposure is that while a hypo kid enjoys everything that you provide, a child that's more anxious, you want to do this step by step. It's really kind of figuring out how much you can expose them, but also what I usually like doing is when you, for example, use shaving cream or Play-Doh or whatever, use tools. Because if the kid just use a pencil or a stamp and pushes the stamp into the Play-Doh or into the shaving cream, it's more likely there is some material that ends up on their finger anyway, and then you have a towel ready and you clean the kid's hand, it's okay. So you want to model that it's safe. So even when you tip your finger in the shaving cream and put a little spot on your hand, you're like, oh, great. So kind of you want to model that's safe. So another really great activity which I like is the Wilberger brushing protocol, and I put a little picture this here. So basically how that works, to this protocol there is a little brush that goes with it. It looks like this. It looks like a baby brush. So the bristles are very fine, and what the idea behind this protocol is that you use the brush to kind of go down on your arm. So you start at your shoulder, and I'm sorry, my microphone is kind of in the way, but I hope everybody can see this. So basically what you want to do is you want to put a little bit more pressure on and then go from the shoulder all the way down to your hand. So you can do this on your arms, you can do this on your legs. And then the idea is that you consistently provide some little bit more pressured strokes to get your kid more used to a different tactile input. The idea is that you do this on a regular basis, 2 to 3 weeks, and on a regular basis also throughout the day. I have been working with a little boy. He is 4, and he struggles with brushing hair and also taking a shower and washing his hair. And his parents were introduced to it. And the first time I followed up with them, dad reported that he struggles a little bit accepting the brush. I mean, I recommended just, if he is really fighting you, I wouldn't fight him back. But if you feel like he's just wiggling and not really enjoying it, I would just keep going to see if at some point he gets used to it. And parents, I think, have been using that for like 2 weeks now. And when I checked in last week, they said, he's feeling that his son is getting more used to it. And he also has noticed that brushing and his hair and also washing is not as much of a struggle anymore as it used to. It's not fixed yet, but he sees there are some slight improvements. So many of those kids that are more hyper also have problems with toe walking. And so what I usually recommend is try to have them walk barefoot as much as possible. So if they have a hard time walking outside, maybe you want to start inside. If they still don't want to wear inside and don't take their shoes off or their socks off, maybe you can put the socks somewhere else. So they have to walk barefoot to get the socks in order to at least get some input, because the more exposure they can get, the better it is. And I know there's always struggle to get the kids to that exposure, because they have their own little ideas and they're not always as cooperative as we want them to be. But I think our job, or at least my job as an OT, is to kind of figure out how can we make it as pleasant as possible to get them exposed as much as possible. So like earlier I mentioned that kids also have problems with oral sensitivity. If there's a feeding clinic in your area, I think signing them up for that, or call your insurance to find out where the closest feeding clinic is that your child can participate in, also what clinic is covered by your insurance. So giving choices for clothing. I have noticed over the years that most children that have an aversion or don't like certain clothing styles, it's not the style, it's more the texture of the clothes. So how much elastan is in there, how much cotton is in there. So if there's a shirt that your child really likes, look at the ingredients of the shirt and see which ingredient is the most, and can you find other clothing that is very similar to that one. Also, sometimes it helps when there's a favorite character on there. If you decide you want to cut the tags out of the shirt, it's always good. What I want to make sure that every single piece is really cut out. Sometimes they're stuck under the seam, and when you cut them off, there is this little bit piece left. You think it doesn't bother, but most children that have sensory tactile issues, they will feel every single corner and every single piece in their clothing. So you want to make sure that it's all gone. And then also provide structure throughout the day. Because when you imagine there are some tactile difficulties, kids are always, or their brain is always on the lookout. Where is something that, can bother me, something that I don't like? So the more structure is provided throughout the day, the more the kid is familiar what's coming next and what's coming after that. So they're more prepared, which calms them down, and it's easier to transition from A to B, or easier for them to participate in activities. So some additional strategies is also, if you have the option to take your child clothes shopping so they can kind of feel what they like or what they don't like, that's a good idea. Then a sensory bin is always also something nice. And those are 2 pictures of sensory bins. A sensory bin is basically a box of different materials. You can put in beans, you can put in lentils, you can put in beads. They're like those little water beads that you can also use. You can put in sand, and I have seen parents put in construction trucks. They have put in little characters that their kids like, and then they have to kind of dig them in, find them. You can even put like sorry about that. So the picture on the bottom here has a little list of items that are hidden in the sensory bin. So you can even cross off which items you have found that, is already a little fine motor activity together with a sensory bin. Or up here, that's a water theme sensory bin. So you can even mix different materials in the bin, and then the kids kind of can play with it. So if you know your child has some tactile difficulties and you want to work with them, but it's kind of a hit or a miss, provide some proprioceptive input before. Because when you think about it, when your body is more calm and you feel your body more, you're more likely to actually use your body and use your skin. So you can do some wheelbarrow walks, you can do yoga poses, you can do compression massage, you can even do an obstacle course before and include some tactile inputs into the obstacle course. So the kids can regulate it throughout the obstacle course while working on the tactile system. So you can use Play-Doh, you can use different kind of slime, dough activities to kind of work either on the hypo or the hyper skills. You can even use, the holidays are coming up, baking tasks. So if you're a baker and your child enjoys participating, they can, kind of work the dough. If you feel like that's too much for your child, give them the mixer. And I'm talking about this handheld mixer, because the nice thing about that is it provides vibration, and vibration is calming for the body. So it's just like when you sit in this vibrating stool or chair at the airport and they're kind of giving you a massage that also calms you down. If it's too much, on the other hand, then you're tapping into the hyper tactile system and it gets too much. But I feel like the handheld mixer, you can provide your child with guidance, and the vibration is not all over the body. So really just in the hand, which can help calming. And any kind of vibrating toys, like the little massage toys, tend to be more relaxing when you put this on the body. So that can help your child also to calm down. So then when we look at the vestibular system, that's the next system we're going to talk about. The vestibular system is a very interesting system. So the vestibular organ sits in the ears. So every kind of movement that happens in the environment where you move your head left and right, back and forth, that's when you activate the vestibular system. So when you think about it, there are a lot of movements we do throughout the day where we have to activate or to move our head. So here you also have to distinguish between hyper and hypo. So the hyper kids are usually the ones that can't tolerate a lot of movements. Those are the kids that can get motion sick in the car. They don't tolerate very well getting on the escalator or the elevator. Some of those kids were crybabies when they were little, because there were too much movement. And usually you rock your baby back and forth, or you throw it up in the air. So any kind of movement can set off their sensory system. Those are also the kids that don't move a lot in general, because every time they move, they activate their system and they get super dysregulated or nauseous and don't like the movements at all. So some of those kids even avoid walking on uneven surfaces. So they can be on the beach. While this can also be a tactile issue, but it can also be a vestibular issue because the sand is uneven. So you have to stabilize your body more while walking over the sand. You can kind of tease this out. If you keep the shoes on, the kid is okay. Walking with shoes on the sand, it's probably more a tactile issue versus a vestibular issue, because the shoes kind of is the only surface that they don't feel the sand, but they still have to balance out their body. And kids with difficulties in the vestibular system tend to have poor motor planning. That's the reason, because they're avoiding so many movements that they never really get to experience how to balance or how to walk on uneven surfaces. So on the other hand, when you have the hypo kids that are constantly seeking sensory input, constantly spinning, constantly jumping, they're always on the go, they enjoy hanging upside down. When you go to the amusement park, they want to go, 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 go. Or when you throw them up in the air, you feel like, oh my God, I'm tired. Why is this kid not tired? So they're constantly seeking sensory and vestibular input. And like the kids with the proprioceptive input, they also cannot sit still, have a lack of attention. The reason is there similar to the proprioceptive system, because they're seeking so much input that they don't have time to sit still. They don't have time to pay attention. So, and those are also the kids that never really get dizzy, and they have a delayed nystagmus. What that means is basically when you put your child on a swing and you spin them in circles and you suddenly stop them. So then you want to look them in the eyes, and when the eyes moving left and right really fast, that means the nystagmus is correct. But some kids have a really delayed movement. First of all, their eyes don't start to go left and right at first, but at some point they start going, so it's delayed. Or the movement of the eyes left and right is really delayed in general. So when you see this in your child, it usually means that their vestibular input has to be so intense before their brain actually realizes that there's something going on. It's a nice activity to test. You still want to make sure that the kids don't get too much vestibular input so that they get super dizzy or they can get sick. So because sometimes it's a delayed response, they're not getting dizzy after spinning for 10 minutes, but half an hour later they are super sick, because that's how long the vestibular system needs to actually kick in. So, and most of those kids, if it's hyper or hypo, demonstrate a weak core, lack of posture control, and difficulties with bilateral coordination. So the core, the bilateral coordination, and the vestibular skills are basically linked together. So from an OT perspective, it's mostly that those, when there are some vestibular issues, most kids always show some lack of posture control and always have some bilateral coordination skill issues. Bilateral coordination basically means what both of your hands do together. So that can, for example, be an activity where your kid has to get dressed because you pull the shirt over your hand with both hands. An activity would, for example, be catching and tossing a ball. It would be button skills because one hand has to do something while the other hand does something completely different. Then what you can also experience is putting on shoes, because you have to use both hands to put the shoe on. Then would be another activity, cutting skills. You have to hold the paper and you have to cut with the other hand. So when we look at strategies, you have to kind of look at strategies for the seekers, but also for the avoiders. So from a seeking perspective is you want to provide vestibular input, but not to the point where the kid gets dizzy. So it should be regulated. So for example, go from A to B. You have to remember the vestibular system is in the ear. So we want to make sure it gets input, but not overstimulated. Because when kids get overstimulated, that's when we have more of a meltdown or kind of like overregulation. We want to help our kids to actually calm down versus spiking them up. So for example, when you pick up your child from school, most schools require that you have to sit all day. They have PE, but there is very little time to run around, to kind of do your thing. Like I feel like a couple years ago, or like probably our age more, kids had more time outside. They were just more engaged. So the sitting down was less. So when they come from school, give them some playground time where they just kind of get the wiggles out, get the sensory input that they usually don't get or not get as much in school. It's just like when you come home from work, the last thing you want is go back to your laptop and write or type. So you usually take a break, you do something, you get yourself a cup of coffee or something where you can kind of change your sensory strategy to be more ready if you have to go back to work and, you know, do a night shift of something. So also when you have to do homework with your child, provide some movements before you actually have them sit down. It's just like you want to set your child up for success by providing some movements before they have to use their brain. So you can also do a wheelbarrow walk where they use their arms and also work on your posture. A trampoline is a good activity. There are also those little ones that you can have in your house, somersaults, where the kid just keeps rolling. But I would say let them roll from A to B, so it's structured. And while summer rolls also work nicely on posture control, because they have to kind of work, keep their body straight before they make this roll. So then there are also different kind of swings that I like, and I have a nice example of a swing here. I love this swing, for example. It's kind of like a lycra swing. The nice thing about this swing is, I'm not advertising any company here, but it's just a personal favorite. This swing has the ability that you can hide yourself in there. So you can swing with it, you can be in different position, if it's just sitting, if it's going on your belly, if you just want to lay in it, it's dark once you're all the way in, and then you can just swing. And it's like when you sit in a rocking chair at night and you just rock back and forth on a swing at night, it's more calming because there's just no light exposure. So one of my favorite ones. So some additional strategy would also be, for example, wobble cushion. So this wobble cushion is a nice strategy to use when your child has to sit for a long time. There are two different sides. One is the spiky side and one is the more soft side. So if your child, for example, in school has to sit for a long time, they can still get some movements and can wiggle around without bothering the other kids. If you decide getting one of those, I would just kind of figure out how much air to put in there, because I also had parents tell me, oh my God, we got it, we love it, but it's not working. And I'm like, okay, what's the problem? So kid doesn't want to stay on it. So they brought it in and we noticed it was pumped up all the way and looked like a balloon. So take some air out, try it on yourself. So there should be enough air in there that you can wiggle your body, but not too much that you're falling off or too little that you kind of sink in. So when you work on the vestibular seeking or the vestibular avoiding, you always want to have good foot support. So when you look at those two images here, so this boy has down here the feet, the heels up, which changes automatically the position of the knees and the position of the hips, and then the posture is kind of more rounded. So those kids usually have a really hard time paying attention because they have a hard time sitting. So if you provide them more of a grounded seating position, they have a higher chance to actually pay attention because it's easier to sit. It's just like when you get off the couch or when you sink in a couch, it's usually more calming and you have, you get more comfortable. Let's put it this way. So foot support is really key in order to pay attention, but also to do any kind of activities. So it's like when you do your child's homework on a bar stool, it's usually harder for the kid to sit there and do homework versus with better foot support. So then also a nice vestibular input activity is a bouncing ball, where kids first of all also have to make their body really stiff in order not to fall off. But they can also bounce from A to B in kind of in a more structured way. But this is a really great tool or toy for our vestibular seekers, and comes with a pump most of the time, so you can even pump it up. And also when your child can help pumping, because this pumping also provides some proprioceptive input where it needs to use their muscle and is just part of the activity. Then any kind of slides on the playground are really great for our vestibular seekers, just like horseback riding, because the horse goes up and down and you constantly get some vestibular input. Then log rolling is also a good activity for at home, and because you constantly roll. And then any kind of start and stop games, like the red green light, go stop, because the kid needs to stop and go, and that then the head was activated. Okay, so when we look at the avoiders, then we want to work on upper body strength. So, and I put a little stool here, it's called a T stool. So where you really can work on upper body strength, they have to balance themselves out. I use this a lot with my clients, and most of the time in the beginning, they have a hard time sitting on it. So using it for like an activity at a table in the beginning is not a good idea because they keep falling off. But over time, they get used to making their body straight. And because you have to kind of think about it, when your body is not straight here and the vestibular system is in the ear, you kind of work on keeping your body straight, but while your head is bobbling back and forth. For kids, that's a really hard activity. It's just like when you stand on a ladder and want to replace a light bulb. So it's much harder to do this on a ladder than when you actually do the same activity on the floor. So think about it. You want to really have a strong core to help your child out has more difficulties with the vestibular system. And also you want to take baby steps. Most kids really freak out when there is a vestibular input that they can't tolerate. And you as a parent are basically the ones that they trust. So if we go too fast, oh, the elevator that's fine, we're going to do this. And your child trusts you, you get into the elevator and whee, it goes up. That's the first and last time you probably take your child into an elevator. So baby steps, because you want to have your child feel comfortable. Also, if you want to introduce a swing, and most kids that are avoiders will not sit in a swing, you want to kind of introduce them by just having their feet on the floor without even swinging. So another activity is like, if you want to just, get them more comfortable in this area, it's just reaching up and down activities. You have a favorite toy on the floor, they take it, put it on the coffee table. Oh, here's another piece. Like puzzles are really great if you have a car ramp or run a racetrack. So you can take cars and just have them run, and there's another car, have them run. So kind of looking up and down is the idea behind that. And then additional strategies would be also a sufficient playground time, because you want to kind of expose them. Slow dancing movements, rocking back and forth. You can even do slow yoga poses where the head goes down or head goes up. Obstacle courses where kids has to climb up and down. And then, like I said, this T-stool, my favorite. Okay, so then we also had mentioned earlier the interoception and auditory system. The interoception is basically everything that you feel on the inside. Then kids mostly have problems with pain. They don't feel it very well. They don't really know when they're hungry or thirsty. They may feel some pain somewhere, but they don't know if it's in their stomach or where it is. They don't really feel when they have to go to the bathroom. They have problems feeling their internal organs, for example, feeling their heart rate, or when their breathing goes up, for example, when they were really running around and they just don't feel like they're sweating or that they need to take a break. So with the auditory system, it's that they're hyper sensitive with noises. They have problems with decoding, basically understanding what is being said. Integration, like when there is something like in the background where there's noises, so they can't really distinguish between who said what and where does the noise come from. And the next one, I'm probably butchering this from my pronunciation, the prosodic. It's basically the noise level. And then organization, also what comes first, second, and third, and also memorizing where things, what were said. So kids with auditory issues usually have more frequent ear infection. It's not consistently, but I have noticed just based on my experience, those are the kids that have more problems with this. So what can we do? So the interoception system is usually linked with the proprioceptive system. If you don't feel what's going inside of your body, you usually don't feel like what's going on outside of your body. So body mapping activities are great. So for example, this picture here is a body mapping activity. So you lay your child down on a big piece of paper and then trace their body around. And when they get off, they kind of can see how big their body is, where their arms are. They can color it in. They can kind of name what each part of the body is, or you can even put, if your kid is nonverbal, you can take pictures and put it on each joint so they kind of can match the activity. You can do breathing exercises, and just like when you breathe first, put the hands of your child on your chest so you kind of can feel your chest rise or your belly rise. You can do this vice versa. Also chest, stomach movements. Then you can use picture cards for emotions, social stories, but also heavy work such as the sandwich game. So additional strategies would also find your pulse, kind of just to feel how that feels. Exert activities, for example, when you run a lot, and then kind of find your pulse right after, or your heart rate, so you kind of have to feel what it's like. And I would always start off modeling at first, because if your child sees what you're doing, they're more likely to actually do it on themselves. So then also the steamroller game is one of my favorites. Basically, when you have one of those big balls and then you roll it over your child. We had mentioned that earlier, and most of the kids I've been working with really like it and calm down because they feel their body way more. So auditory. So auditory is a little bit more of a tricky thing. Kids usually are more hypersensitive. And what I have usually suggested is, and I'm sure many parents have heard of that, using a headphone if kids tolerate it. So there's a bunch of kids that don't tolerate headphones very well. So to kind of approach this, and it's kind of a hit or miss. So first of all, I would always buy a headphone that is motivating to your child. For example, 2 examples, like for girls, maybe something girly like character that they really enjoy. For the boys, the same. If it's like a theme headphone or something that they resonate with, it's usually the more motivated they are to use it, the more they will use it at the end. Or if you go outside and it's really loud. So, oh, hello. Hi, Hannah. Welcome. When it's loud, you kind of pop the headphones on right when it's super loud, so they feel the cause and effect. So that when you put them on, oh, it feels better. You take them off. Oh my God, it's too much. So when kids feel the effect, they're usually more likely to use it. That doesn't mean that they will use it all the time, but they kind of have to understand what the difference is between using them and not using them. And then also watch your child's warning signs, because most of the time when kids get dysregulated, there are some warning signs. They either move more or they get more verbal, usually finding out what the warning signs are so you can help your child better regulating. So other strategies to kind of help them with that system is, for example, using a white noise machine fan or quiet music in the background, something that is more calming. You can also see if you can have your child watch their favorite show with a headphone on, so they kind of get used to wearing the headphone, because the motivation is to watch the movie. And if they can't hear the movie, then they probably, they want to hear it. So it's more likely that they will wear a headphone to get used to. And over time, you're talking of getting used to, not from one time wearing it, but from, step by step, getting them used to it. Or sometimes the only way is just to avoid distracting noises, or put them in, for example, in a classroom where it's more quiet. Okay, so from a visual strategies or visual challenges is, and I notice we are almost out of time, but I'm going to keep going. I feel like there's a lot to talk. So it's everything that your eyes process. Again, I said earlier, it's not vision. The 20/20 doesn't mean that your child needs glasses when they have problems in that visual system, but it's more what your eyes see and how the brain processes. So most of the time, kids have problems with spelling, have poor handwriting, also difficult understand the concept of time. They enjoy hiding in dark spots because the lights are sometimes is too much and the brain can't process the different light shades. Confuses similar looking words, letter reversals like be and d, was and were. The reading comprehension can be difficult, but it can also be difficult copying skills from the whiteboard onto the paper, or from the paper left to the paper to right. Most kids really enjoy stimming behaviors in terms of moving objects, spinning toys, or I have also seen kids really enjoying just dropping and throwing things. So from visual strategy perspective, so you also want to work on posture here to kind of get your child more stable here with your trunk, because the eyes are, again, they're in the head. So if you don't, if you're not stable here, the eyes are always moving and you have a harder time tracking things. So any kind of tracking exercises of a worksheet or just copying from left to right so your eyes have to get stronger, it's a good activity to practice. So then you can also use a ruler for reading. It's basically something like that here. So it kind of only shows what you're reading, so your kid cannot miss a line or skip something. So then also line paper is, oops, that was the wrong order. Okay, here we go. So line paper, to help your child understand where the lines are. Back in the days, most schools provided line paper. These days, most of the time, it's just a line and the kid has to write. So it's more difficult to understand where the top and the bottom is. So line paper is really important for kids to learn how to write, and make sure that your kid understood the instructions. So if your child has a hard time seeing or processing what you mean, like put your hands on the shoulder and like, Johnny, did you understand me? So you want to kind of provide a little bit more squeeze, or repeat what they said, or kind of any kind of visual contact so you understand, or you know that your child has understood what you want. Or if you said, did you understand it, say yes to mommy, and then have them repeat yes. So also for reading, have a solid background. Like if you work with letters, maybe have a black surface or something darker when the letters are light, so it's not as confusing. And you also want to make sure that the table is clean during activities. So the more visual distraction there is, the harder it is. In order to work on posture, you can also work on a vertical surface, if it's a mirror, if it's the wall, where you just put the activities on it and let them write there.